A viewer requested some help with Pauper Etude number 23, so here's a video with 10 tips to help you master Pauper Etude number 23. Hi, my name is Liz from Cellomoji.com, and I give you tips and tools so that you can learn how to play all of your cello music. So it is that famous time of year again. If you are watching this video at the time that it's being put out, it is that famous time of all region auditions, and soon after it'll be all state auditions as well. If you are a cello player in the state of Texas and you are taking this audition, then you know that Pauper 23 is one of the etudes that you have to learn. First off, make sure that you have the right edition of the Pauper etudes. There are definitely a few editions out there, but the TMEA website specifies which edition they want you to work off of, and that is the one by Stutch, is his last name. And I know some schools definitely hand out copies of the editions that they have, but if you are a cello player or you are looking to advance your cello studies, definitely go out and just get your own copy of the entire Pauper etude book. Inevitably, every year for all region and all state auditions, there's usually a Pauper etude on the audition, so you can always get a head start and look ahead at other etudes. Along these lines of this audition, make sure you also check the TMEA website for any errors that may be in the part. So in this case, in measures 16 and measure 42, those are C naturals instead of C sharps. And then also in measure 26 and measure 52, those are F sharps. Those are kind of important key details that they point out, so make sure that you mark that in your part and you're also practicing the correct notes. Tip number 2, make sure you are checking out the tempo ranges that are listed on your etude. So in this case here, they list the tempo between quarter note equals 66 to 80. You have to pick a tempo that best suits your technical abilities and your comfort level of the etude. I've definitely heard a few mixed things across the board from students. Some say they like to move slowly, some say it goes a lot easier when you are playing this etude at a faster pace. So either way though, you have to practice with a metronome, make sure you stick to a really solid tempo. There's nothing worse than to have this feeling of like, I don't know what speed I'm at, or to even hear yourself fluctuating, going faster and slower. So already, if you haven't already done so and it's getting pretty close to your audition date, make sure you are consistently practicing with a steady metronome beat. Be sure you're practicing the D major scale and the B minor scale at least 3 octaves, and definitely, if you can, add in those arpeggios. There are definitely a ton of arpeggios in this etude, so it's kind of a no-brainer to try to practice some of them. Practice the variations on the arpeggios as well. If you have the Yampolsky scale book, you basically cover the whole gambit of possible arpeggios, so that's always a good one. Or any of the other scale method books will have various editions of arpeggios. If your area is doing the later half of the Pauper etude, then definitely make sure you are also practicing octaves in the scale, so B minor or the D major octaves, because as you can see in the second half of the etude, there are octaves. Now in my area where I am teaching, they actually cut all of the hard stuff and it's just actually the front half of the etude, but I do know that some people might have a different cut. So make sure that you are practicing octaves. Plus, it's good practice if you are in thumb position and you're playing a lot of things in thumb position, that you understand the spacing of your hand when it's in an octave. Remember, when you are playing octaves, your thumb and your ring finger are creating sort of a Y shape. So when you are lower down, closer to like first position, and you're doing octaves down there, it's a pretty wide Y. But once you go up higher, and the higher and closer to the bridge you get, it becomes smaller and both fingers move together at the same rate. It's not like one finger is only moving and the other one is not. So if you kind of understand this sort of Y shape that you're creating with your hand and how it's getting smaller and bigger, that's definitely going to help you a lot when you do octaves. This is also helpful when you are doing some of the sequences that happen in the Pauper etude, even in the earlier half, because if you can kind of keep the octave shape of your hand, then your thumb will be set and in the right place place for the notes. So popper is all about sequences, and what sequences are is a combination of fingerings where you do a certain pattern with your hand and then you move to a new position and you do that same pattern of fingering just in a different location. And popper is like the king of sequences. I feel like all of his etudes have a series of sequences in it, and this etude is no exception. So I'll give you a little demo here of measures 17 through 20 of a sequence. So where we ended off last, we are on a B with our tooth, and hopefully at this point, after the last 3 notes there, your thumb, you want it to be up and ready to go because it happens pretty quickly after that. So your thumb will be on the G. Wasn't quite ready there, but here's C sharp, A sharp, B, and then you have to figure out what is that distance between your thumb and your second finger. So I figured that I needed to move my thumb back just a little bit wider than I thought. Here's the B, thumb with a G. Now I know this D sharp is going to be a little bit higher than I think because B and E are directly across from each other. So the D sharp will basically be touching. So here's the D sharp, E, back to the G. Now where your second finger was, now you have to move your thumb. So here was the 2. So now my thumb is where my 2 was, and then here's the E. Okay, so in this next one, again, I realize that my 1 is going to be high up because the next note is a G, and the G and the D are directly across from each other. So here's E, B, F sharp. So my 2 fingers are touching F sharp, G. Cross back over A string. Then I'm moving my thumb to where my second finger was. Now, to double check, you can use your harmonic E, but probably when you're playing this passage, playing a harmonic E won't be in your best interest at this point because you're moving through things pretty quickly, but it is kind of a nice, fail-safe way of getting that E. So here's the E, then 2 on the G. Now, my thumb to 2 interval here is quite small. Remember, as you're going up higher on the cello, all the intervals become smaller and smaller. So what may have been the same distance interval-wise down here, and my hand looks like this, up here it's going to be quite small. So here I'm on the E, G, thumb on the E again, A sharp. Now, again, because the intervals are so small, my A sharp actually now is pretty much crammed next to my thumb. So here's the A sharp, B. It's a 1-1. So instead of even using a different finger, I'm just doing 1-1. Harmonic E, 1 on the G. So again, you can see now this interval of a third, I'm playing with a now this interval with a third, I am playing now with my thumb and a 1 instead of thumb and 2. So E, G, B. Now here, it actually does say use your harmonic E. So I'm gonna take that to give my thumb a break. And then, again, that's also a high E harmonic. Remember, only one finger can be down for these harmonics. Oftentimes I see some students trying to play this high E and wondering why it's not speaking. It's because they forgot to pick up their thumb. So that's a great way of just double checking, hey, I'm playing the right note, because it should sound like the same note. All right, so keep on going here just for a few more measures because the pattern is pretty much the same. After this high E, you have to jump all the way back down to this G that you found a few measures back. So that might take some practicing from the E to the G. So you might want to practice that. Again, you have to figure out for yourself, what is the way that I can find this G every single time? Minus marking your cello with any lines or stickers or tapes or anything like that. Okay, so now I am in 19, keep going. Thumb on the A string on the E. Cross over, my 1 will be a little bit higher than I think. Here's the B natural. My second will be touching because that's a half step, so. Cross over A string. Now put my thumb where my second finger was. And then 3 for the C. Thumb. Cross over, a little bit higher, D sharp. 2. Again, 2 and 1, 2 and 1, yeah, 2 and 1 are touching. Cross back over thumb. Move my thumb now to where my second finger was on the A string. Let's try that again. I'm on the C natural, G. Move up. Now 2 on the E. Again, I wouldn't use harmonic E here. Play a solid E. This one, my first finger's crammed to my thumb. F sharp and G. Just a tiny scooch of the finger, half step. Back to the A string. E. There's that arpeggio. Now here you have to find the octave C. Here's C, and then a C. Let's try it again, C to the C. Tip number 5, remember, Roman numerals that are listed in the pauper etudes refer to strings that you are supposed to be playing on. I see a lot of people sort of ignore the Roman numerals, and maybe in other pieces of music, Roman numerals represented what position you should be in, but in this case, Roman numerals represent the string that you should be on, and this is really important to remember. Let's talk about the end of measure 20 here, which is also the end of the sequence that you saw a little bit earlier. Here it states a high C natural as a harmonic, but I've consulted with others and I've tried to find it myself, and I can't seem to find a natural C harmonic in that octave that kind of makes sense. So I am telling my students to actually play it as a solid C. So I highly recommend that you do that as well. Obviously consult with others and see if they say something different. I have found a C sharp that is a harmonic on the A string, but I have not found a C natural. If someone has found out a C natural, please leave in the comments below on how to play this, because honestly, I personally don't know how to. This solid C natural also really helps with the crescendo that will lead into the next measure. Tip number 7, now let's talk about shifting. It is really important that you are practicing shifts so that you can find them confidently. There is no time to find these notes slowly. And too often than not, I see a lot of my students, they're trying to like slowly ease their way into these notes that are within these crazy shifting sections. And while in most situations it is good to practice it slow, or say when you're first learning this etude, it's good to practice slow, going from note to note. In reality, because of the slurs and because of the nature of the speed of this etude, you actually have to practice finding these notes quickly. So that means your hand has to travel freely between the two notes. Make sure you're not like really pushing down on the fingerboard when you're shifting. And also you have to really know where that note is so that you can practice quickly getting from one note to the other. There is no room for any question on where is this note and how do I find it. I mean, I usually tell my students, if you can find these shifts in almost like autopilot where you're not really worrying or thinking about it too much, then you're probably going to be in good shape to play this at the right tempo. Make sure when you're doing these shifts too that your hand is really balanced. If your fingers are all stretched out, like you're reaching for the note and your fingers are all straight like that, it's not really a consistent way of finding these high notes that you're shifting to. You always want to have a tiny bit of bend in your fingertips and that you're staying nice and balanced going from one note to the other. Number 8. Remember, when you are playing this all region audition, it is all about good tone quality. A lot of people are such a stickler of like, play the slur to the very end or like squeak out notes here and there. And while yes, we do want to honor things like trying to do the slurs to our best of our ability, I'll be honest, if I heard someone playing all of the notes with the slurs, but it was like poor tone quality, whereas the notes were sounding squeezed and tight, versus someone who was just playing a very lovely tone, I would take probably the lovely tone person. I don't know where it is and how the auditions are in your area. In my area here, they're blind auditions, so they're not even really watching you while you're playing. They're just listening to what is the sound quality coming out of your cello. Now, definitely, yes, you can tell when people are changing bows and, you know, breaking slurs and everything. But again, they can't visually see you. They're just listening to you. So, and I think a lot of people forget that if it sounds bad, if it sounds tight, if you're choking out notes, if it sounds crunchy at all, that is not the ideal sound that you want to produce when you're doing your audition. So definitely take care that when you are using your bow, you're trying to create the most beautiful sound, resonant sound that you can. Especially on these long slurs, you're going to have to really work on bow control. Use your bow slowly at the beginning of the slur and then use it faster to create a more free and resonant sound. Number 9. So like I said earlier, my region did not include the octaves that are in this popper etude. However, if you are just learning this popper etude, or if later on when you're doing all state they suddenly include these octaves, let's talk about how to practice the octaves. First, I would practice finding one of the notes, say the upper note. So I would practice finding the upper note, but I would make sure my thumb is kind of ghosting along the bottom note. So even though I'm not trying to play both of them together yet, I'm trying to find one note and my other hand is in the approximate shape. And then I switch. So now my thumb is finding the lower note and then my ring finger is ghosting along the upper note of the octave. Finally, then what I would do is I would play the lower note, the top note, play them together, make sure it's a true octave, and then move on. Lower note, upper note, together, move on. And then after that, then you would play the octave straight and you would go back and forth between the octaves to make sure that it is really clean shifting and really clean movements. A lot of this is pretty much a listening game because it's an octave, right? If it's not in tune, you should be able to recognize it because it is an octave. It is the same note, just in different registers. Tip number 10, make sure you are trying your best with dynamics. Now, I know that popper does not include many dynamics at all. While there aren't many dynamics that are marked, you definitely don't want to play this as a monotone. You can totally go for the obvious things. If it's going up with the notes and pitches, then maybe do a crescendo. If it's coming down, maybe you can do a diminuendo. Also, go for obvious contrast when you are doing something 2 times in a row. For example, measure 21 through measure 25 is basically the same thing repeated twice. Perhaps you can do a contrast. One is louder than the other, just as an example. I hope these 10 tips really help you prepare for your all region audition. I know that I'm directing this video towards people who are taking all region, but just understand that popper etudes are considered standard cello repertoire. So if you are looking to become an advanced cello player, then you definitely want to have experience going through the popper etudes. And yes, there is some talk about why are popper etudes such a standard, but honestly, it's such a good practice. It's challenging your hand to do many things that perhaps you may not see otherwise, but it will definitely add to your toolbox of skills. And not just popper etudes, there are other great etudes out there that are also really great in building up your skills of your left hand as well as your right hand. Remember, tone quality will always be really high up on the list for this audition, Aside from being accurate with your intonation and your rhythm, tone quality is really high up there on the list of things that judges look out for when they are listening to people audition. And this is true whether it was a blind audition or people can actually see you audition. And this is true for auditions across the board. Tone quality is always going to be a huge, huge factor. So don't disregard it just for being a stickler of like what's written on the page. The biggest challenge with the bow in popper will definitely be how to make these bow changes nice and smooth from slur to slur, and to also make sure to not sound like you're running out of bow. If there are any questions that I haven't addressed about this etude, please be sure to leave them in the comments below. I know this can be a really stressful etude, so I am more than happy to help out anyone who is in the process of learning this etude. If you like this video, please be sure to hit that thumbs up and hit the subscribe button and the bell next to it so you won't miss out on any other Cellomoji tutorials. If you would also like to see some tips on the Duport etude, leave that in the comments below as well. I'd be happy to help. Check out the videos on your screen right now for some other videos that can help you on your cello journey. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!